This again. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission, Individual Advancement Program Fiscal Year 2020, Literature Advisory Review Panel. I'm Alberta Barker, Commissioner from Lafayette. Today is April 17th, and we are meeting by conference call and streaming live from a webinar. We welcome applicants who may be listening in today and would like to remind you that you are muted for this review. There is no direct contact or conversation about the evaluation and disposition of applications before, during, or after the panel meeting. At this time, we would like the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they're from in the state. I'll call out your name. Dan Bowman. Dan?
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Dan Bowman, and I'm in Hartford City, Indiana, which is in Blackford County, and I teach creative writing.
Thank you, Dan. Marissa Rinaldi.
My name is Marissa Rinaldi, and I'm the Programs and Donor Relations Manager for the Kurt Vonnegut Museum and Library. Sorry, it's a long name. And we are located in Indianapolis.
Rachel Sahachny.
Hello, I'm Rachel Sahachny, and I am the Programs Manager at the Indiana Writer Center.
Barbara Shoup.
I am the Director of the Indiana Writer Center and also a novelist.
Kevin McKelvey.
I'm Kevin McKelvey from Indianapolis, and I teach a variety of things at University of Indianapolis.
Anna Traverser, IAC staff.
I'm Anna Tragesser, an Artist and Community Services Manager at the IAC.
Now we'll begin the panel review. This is how the process will work. I will announce the application and ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide their assessment of the application based upon the evaluation criteria and their perspective. Panelists, please note that the applications do not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or opposing comments. We are not looking for consensus, just the full evaluation from the different perspectives panelists bring to the table. After the second reader has finished, I will open the discussion for final comments. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, that panelist will be placed on hold while the application is reviewed. Finally, once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their scores in the online system. It is common for scores to change as a result of this broader discussion. These scores save automatically. Are there any questions? Then let's begin. We'll start with the application from Andrew Scott. Barb has a conflict of interest, so she'll be placed on hold for this application's review. The first reader is Rachel.
Hello. I found that in Andrew Scott's application, the project goals and the elements of the project were clearly stated. The narrative supported what the artist was looking for, and it seemed very well planned and thought out. One comment I had was in the career status. It was just a list of publications. I would have liked to see a little bit more reflected in the career status about the teaching and creative writing instruction part that's mentioned later on in the application, but it would have been good to have it there since part of the project is presenting the workshops at in other areas around the state. But other than that, I found the application to be very clearly written and the documents to support the narrative. The public engagement seemed well thought out. Mostly the artist certainly proves that he has experience in the area of presenting these workshops, and also perhaps he has connections in the locations he chose, but I would have liked to see a little more information about why he targeted those areas and if he has connections in those to actually have the location and the audience kind of worked out, more than just saying, I'm going to go here. I would have liked a little more detail in that area.
Thank you, Rachel. The second reader, Dan.
Yeah, I too found this to be really well articulated for the most part. I appreciated the impact on artist career development in terms of the jump from writing short stories to trying to find the timeline to finish a novel. That made a lot of sense and was very clearly stated. I appreciated the work sample, and I also liked in terms of the public participation piece, to have these 3 centers. I guess I certainly see Rachel's point and wanting to know maybe a little bit more about how those were selected. But I like the mention of writers in the schools and things like that to kind of set the foundation for how that could play out. I also thought the feasibility piece was really in order. It looks very feasible and well considered.
Thank you, Dan. Any new, additional, or opposing comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments.
Alberta, I forgot to mention earlier, it takes a little bit of time for folks to click unmute and also to navigate back to their evaluation. So if you could give us just a little bit of time between moving on, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Let me know if you need more time. If not, we'll move to Candace Denning. Let's see, Rachel and Barb have a conflict of interest, so they'll be placed on hold for this application's review. The first reader is Marissa.
Hello there. In my comments for that first section, I just pointed out a typo that I believe there was in the first statement. And she says during the next 4 years, but I thought maybe the last 4 years, because talking in past tense about having been writing this novel. So I put a comment in there to review that and make sure that is grammatically correct. And then I recommended putting the goals into a SMART goals format, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, just to get more of a well-rounded sense of their goals. I kind of list that I gathered her goals are to write more, continue teaching the adult classes, and working with clients on their books. These are really great goals to have, but I just wanted to see how they relate to the grant specifically. Thought that might help make this application stronger. With the quality of the artist's work, I thought that the samples provided were very strong. Short comment to recommend giving more detail about the book in the project description field, just to kind of give the reviewer more insight as to what the sample is. Wanted to know a little bit more about who the audience is for this novel. Is it young adults, older, etc.? And then for the public benefits section, I wanted to know more about how the project would be marketed. I don't think the application went into great detail about this. How does the applicant plan to compete with similar discussion seminars? Does she already have a following on social media, etc.? So I just recommended that may make the application stronger. How did the applicant arrive at 5 or 6 to 20 participants? It just seemed kind of like a random number that was in there. Was there any research that went into finding this number? What marketing efforts are in place for the book itself? What measurable ongoing engagement will be included in the workshop? Because that's one big thing for these that I noticed was ongoing engagement is huge. So I just wanted to know more about that. And I thought the audience seemed somewhat broad here, so just targeting that a little bit more. Sorry, I'm just reviewing here. I didn't, for the timeline and feasibility, I don't think it was very clear when the discussion seminar would be held. Will there be multiple? Will there just be one big one? And just wanted some more detail as to how the funds will be used. And I recommended breaking down these costs beyond saying it will be used for rent and living expenses. You know, how much is rent? What do the living expenses entail? So I think it would just make it stronger to kind of break that down more. And I think that's all of my comments.
Thank you, Marissa. The second reader is Kevin.
Yes, I would probably second a lot of what Marissa said in terms of really just wanting more detail, about the book project itself, as well as some of the community engagement aspects. So just again, just kind of more specifics in terms of like where and how many, and a little bit more on the book project and the timeline itself.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. The next application is Casey.
Sorry, give us just
and
a second. We need to let these folks back into the room. And you could give them just a second to get reoriented. Hi, Barb and Rachel, welcome back. We're moving on to Casey Pycior.
Yes. And the first reader for Casey is Barbara.
Okay, so my comments here are that this application expresses clear artistic goals that make sense based on where the writer is in terms of his prior accomplishments. In terms of the quality of the artist's work, my comment is that the work sample is very strong, which shows that he has the command of the craft needed to take on the novel. His understanding of how fiction works is evident. And I appreciate the applicant's reasonable goal in terms of actually finishing the novel he intends to write. And I appreciate that he has already made the necessary arrangements to do the baseball research. This program is very well planned out and realistic. And as a novelist, I know that you can't always put a timeline on when you're going to be able to finish something that large. So I feel like it's a very, very well thought out project. And then I am looking for, I'm sorry, okay. So he's talking, I'm sorry, I totally missed this. So I'm looking at his community. Yeah, so I think that what he plans to do as his community, which is a workshop, is perfectly reasonable kind of community project. I think it's a good one. So that's what I have to say about this candidate.
Thank you, Barbara. Second reader is Rachel.
I agree. The project was very well presented and thought out on the page. I liked that a lot of work had already been done to establish a baseline of connection with the team. I also liked that there was already communication and relationships established with some of the community organizations there in Southwest Indiana for the public engagement part with the library. My only one comment was, since there is a workshop element as the community engagement, the resume, and I would have liked to see somewhere where the applicant discussed his former experience with leading workshops, even if it was just a mention on the resume of classes that he taught or something of that matter. I felt like that could have been developed a little bit more.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments. And let me know if you need more time. The next application is for Diana J. Ensign. And Kevin, you are the first reader. Kevin, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, too many screens, too small. Yeah, so what I liked about this this application is doing the work and the interviews to, you know, kind of to bring voice to an underrepresented population in our state and find ways to broadcast that and celebrate that across the state. So I think I like seeing that. As far as the artist's work and submission, it looks like that's from a previous project. So maybe like to see a little bit of work that's already happening in this area. And so it seems like with this project overall, it's in a kind of early stage of development where, and maybe hasn't made all the connections with groups of individuals to talk with or places to connect with in Indianapolis and around the state. And that maybe leads a little bit to the public engagement component as well, maybe a little bit more detail there in terms of, you know, is it an ongoing collaboration with some group like the Indiana Youth Group, or is it just more of a kind of a one-off kind of event during Pride Month in June? And so I think just a little bit more detail there, I think would make the application stronger.
Thank you, Kevin. The second reader, Marissa.
I definitely echo a lot of what Kevin says about the project itself being a very powerful one. I would personally, I like to see a lot of voice when the applicant writes. So I believe incorporating the reason why she's passionate about this particular topic would help boost it. She mentions how it will increase her earnings, which is wonderful, but would love to hear more about how the book will elevate her as an author and what other opportunities and connections will this provide in the community, and how will this inspire future projects, just so thinking long term. Again, agree with a lot of what Kevin said in the artist's work section. I kind of wanted to get more of a visual idea of what the book would look like. You know, is it solely text like the writing sample that was provided? Will there be photos included? I just kind of want to get a sense of what this all looks like, because especially with working with the transgender community, I know a lot of people, some people are really interested in having their before and after photos. You know, they can be very powerful. So how will different forms of art be used in this project? And then again, just focusing more on the end goal. There's a lot of focus on the process, but would like to know more about what the end goal looks like. And again, I reiterate that it was kind of unclear whether there'll be one panel event or multiple ones. So just giving more direction there. For the feasibility, I would like to see how the book and readings will be marketed to different audiences, including ones that may, I guess for lack of a better word, have negative feelings towards the transgender or LGBTQ+ community. So how are we being inclusive with people who may think differently than the applicant? That's all I have.
Thank you, Marissa. Any new, additional, or opposing comments?
I would add that I would like to see or have a sense of how the applicant would grow as a writer from the experience, because essentially it's a repeat of the kind of thing that she's done before. I'd like to know how this is different, how it would make her grow. I'm also, I would also like to know, I would like an explanation of why it's classified as literary fiction, because essentially it's a collection of transcribed interviews. So if the author means to bring her personal insights and originality to the work in some way, we don't know that. I think the application would be stronger if it more clearly fit, the definition of literary fiction. Other than that, and I too feel very strongly that I would like to know that the connections with the transgender community had already been made. That's all.
Thank you. Any other comments? Then please finalize your scores and update your online comments. And please let me know if you need more time. The next application is for Gabriela Garcia. And Dan, you are the first reader.
Yeah, overall, I thought that the applicant had a really great sense of where she is in her career. And that was linked to the plan for the use of the funding, which is to attend AWP. That made perfect sense to me. It can be very difficult and cost prohibitive for many people who either aren't in graduate school or don't have a professorship to go to AWP. And yet some of the resources that she mentions that she would want to take advantage of there make perfect sense in terms of further developing her skill set and this particular novel. The quality of the work for me was very, very strong. In terms of the public benefit and community engagement, there's a really nicely outlined plan for an event in Lafayette having to do with connecting with her network through Purdue, which makes perfect sense, and I think that's great. I would love if there was feasibility, and if indeed a book is published and released, I'd love to see some other thoughts. Some of the applicants mention maybe multiple sites for workshops or for readings or things like that. So I would love to hear if there could ultimately, if it was feasible, be a plan for, say, an Indianapolis reading from the book. The budget explanation, hold on, I'm just scrolling down here. In line with feasibility made perfect sense to me. I thought that was all really nicely outlined. It's clear that the research had been done. Again, it's just very clear and really just a kind of a simple plan, but one that makes perfect sense to me.
I'm going to unmute you, Alberta.
Pardon me?
Oh, we had you on mute. We were getting some feedback. So if you were facilitating there, we missed you.
Okay. The second reader is Barbara.
And I would, whoops, my dog is agitating here. Hold on just a second. Go away. The only comment that I would have is that looking at the writer's resume, she states that the novel that she's talking about is already agented with a very prestigious firm, which I recognize, and says that the novel will be submitted to publishers during 2019, which means that the AWP conference would be more likely to offer her the opportunity to gain insight into book marketing rather than editing strategies. Nonetheless, I would like to have seen that, best case scenario, the novel gets sold, what are you going to do then? However, nonetheless, I still feel AWP will be a wonderful experience for a novelist at that stage, no matter what, she ends up needing to get out of it. And I would also agree that the writing sample is very, very strong. That's all.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, I would add to that really quickly. That makes perfect sense to me. I noticed that too, and I almost wondered if there was some changes made on the fly with the timeline. If the application had been done and then an agent was secured, in the meantime and so forth. So yeah, that's a good point.
Any new, additional, or opposing comments?
I just have a quick comment about the career status section. I didn't really get a sense of who the applicant is. I see a long, great list of awards and accomplishments, but I kind of just wanted to, what inspires this applicant to write? I would just like to know more about them and the novel itself and why it's important for Indiana audiences. So definitely think they should keep the awards, but also want to get a sense of who they are too.
Thank you, Marissa. Any other comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments. And let me know if you need more time. The next application is Jessica Renslow. And Rachel, you are the first reader.
Okay. This application, it has a lot of detail in it. I did find myself kind of going back and forth, like reading things over again because it wasn't organized as clearly as I would have liked. But I think that the artist is really trying to explain what seems like a very long running passion project that has a lot of different elements to it. So I can understand why it kind of goes back and forth for me on trying to figure out what's going on. But so one thing that I noticed, just a few comments that I had was that, for example, it talks a lot in the narrative about an online element to the novel, but I had trouble understanding what that was. And the way that the artist's resume and work, I didn't know if she was, like, is she building that or is someone helping her with that? There were a lot of like links, which instead of like explaining things to me, there would be links like, oh, go to this link or go to that link. So that doesn't help me as a panelist because I can't, like, it interrupts the story for me. So I would have liked, instead of referring me to links all the time in her career status, if she would have actually written about her experience in those jobs and how they are a foundation for this new project that she goes in. So, for example, she says that her long-term goal as a writer is to be like Jane Stratton Porter, but I don't know what her other experience as an actual novelist are right now, since she refers more to editing work and translation work. And so in the career status, I would have liked to see something about how she came to novel writing and why she's now turning to that after her great successes in her other aspects of her career. Then also I wanted, like, it said that in her goals it was to get optioned with a very specific agency. So I wondered, well, if that doesn't happen, like, where does the project go after that? Like, I just would have liked to maybe to be not so specific there, but have like some room for, well, if I don't get my one plate, like, what am I going to do after that? So and so again, I was just like thinking, like, her resume also doesn't show where she's been a fiction writer ever. So I just was kind of curious about more of that detail in the story. The community engagement plan was very impressive. To me, it seemed very well planned out. And it showed a lot of evidence that the artist has the relationships in her community with local groups, and she already is engaging in her community in important ways. So I did feel like she would be able to draw it all together in the way that she was suggesting on that. And I believed, due to her other successes in her other career, and she seemed very well organized in her timeline and budget. So I didn't have any, like, and all of that seemed very well researched in terms of the area and the populations and what she had to offer. So I did believe that her feasibility was, it seemed very feasible that she would be able to do that part.
Thank you, Rachel. The second reader, Marissa.
Definitely agree with Rachel on what she said. Anna, quick question for you before I go on. Will they receive a transcript of our comments?
Yes.
Well? Okay.
They'll be anonymous, so they'll just have what you've written.
Okay, so I don't need to go into too much detail. But my comments were, there were a couple spelling and grammar errors that I caught that I found kind of distracting in the project summary section. So I just recommend that the applicant have a friend they trust or someone kind of review those. Just believe it would make that section a little stronger. I recommend adding some measurable goals to the goals section. And then my only other comment was there are in-kind goods and services listed, but it wasn't clear whether or not those are already guaranteed and set into place or if that's something that will be pursued later on.
Thank you, Marissa. Any new, additional, or opposing comments?
Yeah, just one thing I think from me, going back to the Andrea Brown agency workshop, I'm a little unclear about what I might be allowed or not allowed to say, but my experience with teaching writers and being a writer is that this is not probably the best kind of a workshop for a person at that stage to go to, because it's going to focus more, what is she going to learn about writing there? You know, those things are often kind of things that agencies do to generate money in a way that isn't always the best for writers. So I don't know that she has fully researched this agency workshop, and I would like to have known, it would have been I would have felt differently about it if I knew what she thought she hoped to learn about writing there, because she doesn't give a clear description of her career stage as a writer, and there are no professional or educational credentials that reflect, as someone else said, work in fiction. So that choice is something that kind of red flagged for me. Also, just a very small thing. There were acronyms that I had no idea what they meant. So it's better not to use those, I think, to be sure that people know what it is you're talking about. And I felt like this was a pretty unfocused application also. It kind of wandered around, and I think it would have been stronger if she would have gone point by point and spoken only of the things that were directly related to the project. That's all.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other comments? Then please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. The next application is Joseph E. Lee, and Barbara, you're the first reader.
Okay, I gotta find him. Oh, here he is. Okay. Good. Scrolling. Okay. Oh, okay. Impact on career. As the goals of the project clearly explained. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading your thing, not mine. All right. My comment here is, though the artist has not previously published a graphic novel, his writing sample shows that he is capable of the task. This is a new kind of project for him based on, what was in his resume. But I felt like it was you know, an interesting departure and something based on what he gave as his sample was going to be feasible for him. I like it when people stretch and try something new. About the public benefit, I would say that bringing this story to children in this form particularly would be an invaluable tool for those who teach and promote understanding of the Holocaust, as will the opportunity to talk with the author who will have traveled to this place, and possibly even to Eva Kor, who does do a lot of events around this. So yeah, I think the public benefit is one of the real strengths of this. I like it a lot that he's already made the connection with Eva Kor and with the museum, and so, you know, he's got things in place so that if he's able to, if he gets a grant, he's ready to go. He doesn't have to make any more arrangements. So yeah, I think this is strong. And there was a question earlier about the eligibility of whether the foreign travel would work, but it seems like he could use the grant for something other than the foreign travel, since it was going to cost more than that anyway. So I think it's a strong application. That's all from me.
Thank you, Barbara. The second reader is Kevin.
Yes, I really second everything Barbara mentioned. You know, interesting work, important work to bring that story into the graphic novel form, a very popular genre with children and teens right now. And more importantly, he's done the necessary work already to make connections. So, you know, during the grant period, he can go on the trip at the beginning of the grant period and really spend the grant period working on the work that we would like to fund. And so I think, you know, by the time this grant ends, he would have a pretty solid draft of the work already.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments? If not, please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. The next application is Joyce Brinkman. Rachel and Kevin have a conflict of interest, so they will be placed on hold for this application's review. And Dan, you are the first reader.
Okay, hold on one sec. Things that stood out for me in this proposal, I liked the connection between poetry and visual art, this long-standing tradition that this writer wants to enter into. That makes sense to me. I like that her proposal for public benefit would be collaborative workshops, where she would be perhaps co-teaching with a visual artist or with some others who are doing this kind of work. I guess I would have liked to have seen more specific details in terms of who she would partner up with for those kind of workshops. I did like also that there, in that particular section, hold on, I'm just scrolling through, that there was a poll, a survey that she was going to give out to really try to better understand the needs of her community and what people would be looking for in a workshop. I thought that was a nice strategy overall. Her career development and the impact on the development of this particular project, I found interesting. She's able to articulate kind of a long journey of participating in the arts in Indiana and facilitating arts for others. That having been said, I guess there wasn't much. This project seems to sort of come out of nowhere in terms of that. She doesn't have experience in particular, you know, with the painting and the accompanying poems. It just happened to be this sort of burst of inspiration. It felt like, which is interesting. And the work sample does show that she's engaged in this pursuit. I thought the quality of the work sample was somewhat uneven, but compelling overall. I like her descriptions of learning about Eastern forms and continuing to kind of be a student and keep growing in that area. I thought that was good. And I think that the applicant outlined her financial needs pretty clearly. It was clear to me that there was some research done in terms of the costs of art supplies and things like that. And so that was nice to see those figures put forward in a pretty clear way. And that's it.
Thank you, Dan. The second reader, Barbara.
I thought it was a very well put together application, very well organized and easy to read and think about. I felt like her resume really did reflect her commitment to learning the craft of poetry and exploring new and challenging ways to express herself. And I felt like this new project would deepen her understanding of Asian poetry and widen the scope of her work, which I think is really wonderful, and what these grants are so great for. It wasn't clear to me, however, whether I was meant to look at the quality of the poet's words, which, I mean, she is a poet, but she's not an artist, or whether I was supposed to be looking at the quality of the words and the images together, and make a single judgment based on how they work together. So it would have been helpful to know what the applicant sort of wanted us to be looking at in a more specific way right there. And I agree. I think the public benefit, the workshops are good. I like the idea that she'll be working with minority youth to bring in another audience, and generally the diversity of the programs and the audience. And I feel like the applicant's past work in the community, based on her resume, is all of a piece with her work as a poet, which I think positions her very well to be able to plan and execute the programs she describes. I like the plan. I already said that. I like the plan to work with minority youth and combining the visual and literary arts. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Barbara. Any new, additional, or opposing comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments. And let me know if you need more time. And I think we can allow Rachel and Kevin back in. And the next application is for Lee Sauer. The first reader is Marissa.
Alrighty, so I thought that the career status field had good in-depth detail, and I like the fact that they've worked with the senator before, because I thought it provided more credibility and makes this a stronger application. With the career field, again, I just would like to have more introduction instead of just jumping right in. Just kind of want to get a sense of who the applicant is. It kind of seemed like that section ended without really being wrapped up. It didn't have a very strong conclusion that tied everything back together. The goals section seemed like it had a lot of hopes and ifs statements, which I don't think helped make this a stronger application. So just kind of changing the words into stronger statements might help. I believe that the reviewers would like to see that there's already an interest. So if he's maybe referenced conversations he's had with interested readers, it would help strengthen the application. There's a lot of content in here about how they want to get the novel into as many hands as possible, and that they'll be distributing free copies. Just from experience, my organization is doing this with Slaughterhouse 5 and trying to get the book into every hand of every Indiana high school sophomore. So we've had some difficulty kind of getting our message out there and getting interest for sponsorships and things. So with that in mind, I just recommend for this application talking more about PR and marketing efforts, just knowing that it's not always as simple as it seems. So just a recommendation there. Will the applicant be hiring an agency or a PR practitioner? You know, what efforts are being taken there? And then the artist's work, I thought it was a great sample that was provided and really kind of helped me visualize what the project will look like. The illustrations helped make the application and the samples more engaging. I love the section about community involvement. However, I would bring it back to how his involvement with these activities will benefit the project directly itself. Will he target these communities for readings? This section just kind of seemed to end without relating back to the project. So just kind of tying everything up together would help. And then I believe that the programs and engagement should be more clearly defined. So I was just kind of listing what I gathered. So I gathered that an online community would be created, but I didn't see much about Indiana specifically. So just kind of relating it back to Indiana more. I didn't see an estimate as to how many people will participate. I think that would help strengthen the section. And then I have a note in here too that in this section, the applicant mentioned the portion about the generation and climate change. I didn't think that would be best suited for this section. It seemed more like a tangent, I thought, which is great information to know, but maybe put it somewhere else. And then feasibility. Sorry, I'm trying to remember here what I said. I'll just say what I wrote and then we can figure it out from there. So I recommend moving the cities in Indiana the applicant will be operating in to the public participation section. Okay, so I think they mention where the cities will be, but I think they should also put them in the feasibility section. Project management section should include a solid timeline, which I didn't see. You know, in what months will the book giveaway be held? When does it end? When will news release be sent? When does the project conclude? So just need more information there. And then just need to break down what the travel expenses are. Does this include lodging? Kind of good more information there. And then how many classes will the applicant be hosting? Because this will determine the cost of drawing materials needed. So just need to make sure that's more clear, I thought. I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Marissa. The second reader is Rachel. Rachel?
I'm not seeing Rachel on the screen. Excuse me.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Now we can.
Can you hear me too? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I was saying, so I think that Marissa did a really great, thorough job of reviewing this application, and she certainly touched on a lot of thoughts and comments that I had myself. I did feel like there was a lot of passion in this application. The artist is certainly passionate about climate change and wanting to get his message out there, but it did get in the way of me being able to understand his exact plan and program. In terms of the public engagement, it referenced a lot about what he has been doing previously. It didn't seem like he was planning anything different than the usual plan that he's already had, which, I mean, and I feel like part of what he's saying is it's been hard to find his audience, and he's looking for new ways to reach people, but it wasn't really supporting that this is a new way to reach people for me. I also noticed that one of the main goals that was standing out to me seemed to be the idea that giving the book out would lead to a movie deal. And I did feel like that was kind of an unfeasible idea. I didn't know, besides just getting free copies of his book to give to the new audience, I didn't really see the correlation in how this would help him develop as an artist and grow his skills. So I liked how Marissa was bringing out, well, what's the next step? You know, what about marketing, or where are you really changing things up here to come up and develop a new plan for the outcome that you're looking for. And I think that's basically all I had to add.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments?
Yeah, a couple from me. I would like to see a goal for personal artistic growth and development. This is really all about promoting a book that's already been written, but I don't see anything here about, you know, the person as an artist, which I think would make the application stronger. And I also had a question about the community project, because he intends to engage people in learning basic cartooning skills during visits to schools. But I think this would be a stronger application if it included engagement in activities that would help people better understand and appreciate literature, or if he is doing cartooning in such a way that it would, you know, it would relate to literature, then that could have been explained to make it more clear. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other comments? And please finalize your scores and update your online comments. And let me know if you need more time. Now, Anna, were we gonna take a break now, or?
Yes, would anyone like to take a break? Any of the panelists? 5-minute break.
I'm good to keep going if
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep going.
Okay, the next application is for Michael Lewis. Kevin, you are the first reader.
Yeah, let me bring this up. Yeah, so I think the strengths were with this, you know, kind of interesting Midwestern novel in its early stages, and finding avenues to get feedback on that and to take it outside of kind of his typical writing community and find a new writing community. The Iowa Summer Festival, it's a great way to get feedback on that current project. You know, I think as far as, you know, kind of a artist changing careers or moving into a new genre, so this seems like an appropriate stage for that project and the work he's already been doing with Lafayette Writers Studio. I think the main question is maybe having a little bit more about the book itself and kind of where it's headed and where it currently is, and as well as the community engagement part. You know, I'd kind of like to see that community engagement not with the existing writing community. I mean, I think that's certainly part of this project, but really taking this project to another community, either within Lafayette or surrounding counties, where this could be a lot more powerful and of an impact than it would be to kind of an existing audience. You know, I think ideally this work could be getting out there to find new audiences and doing that outside of kind of the existing writing community in Lafayette and West Lafayette. That's all.
Thank you, Kevin. The second reader is Dan.
I agree with most everything Kevin just said. I suppose it's a bit of a different application in terms of the impact on the artist's career development, because his career has not been primarily in writing. I like the clarity of vision in terms of identifying this one workshop that could seem very useful, very helpful in terms of strengthening the manuscript. And I also, in concert with that, I like the applicant's obvious dedication in the writers group, and even hosting it in his home in Lafayette. In terms of some of the areas that I would work on strengthening, I'm not sure about the public benefit exactly, because yeah, again, it's limited to just one community. And I don't know, that ties in with feasibility. For me, the work sample wasn't quite as accomplished as it could be at this stage. And I understand that the artist wants to travel to a place where it can gain greater insight and strengthen the manuscript. But I'd love to see more evidence of that. Okay. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any new, additional, or opposing comments? Then please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. The next application is Michael Harris, and Barbara is the first reader.
Okay, let me pull him up. Okay. My comments on the artist's career development would be just that the applicant does not have educational, my dog, or professional credentials in writing, and does not express a goal for artistic growth. So this would have been a stronger application, even if he doesn't necessarily have, if he's truly a beginning writer, to be expressing a goal to grow as an artist would have made this considerably stronger for me. The sample writing pieces don't support the applicant's project description. They don't state what the historical marker is. He's got a project about markers throughout the state and doing pieces about each one, which I think is a really interesting idea. But the pieces that he has included are all really different. In some cases, they don't even say what the historical marker is or where it's located. So in a book like this, it would be important for the reader to have this information right away. And the reader will also assume that historical information on the marker will follow, letting the reader know why these people or places are important. And the reader will expect similar treatment for each marker, sort of a standardized way of presenting the information. In some cases, these pieces are personal memories and more about the writer than the landmark. So that doesn't work for me in terms of how that project is going to work. So that would be my comment there. And then in terms of the public benefit, I just said that the application would be stronger if the writer had plans to engage with the public in person rather than solely through a website. So that is it for me. And the feasibility, I guess I would just say it's, well, based on his samples, the feasibility of being able to do this does not seem high to me. I would like a lot more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Second reader, Marissa.
All right, just a few here. I feel bad for saying this again, but I would just encourage the applicant to kind of look through it for spelling errors, because I noted quite a few. They're just little, but I did find them distracting. So those are in my comments, exactly what the fixes should be. I didn't see a lot and much. I didn't see it much in regards to two-way and ongoing engagement. So I would just add more there if the applicant plans to have more of that. I think it would help strengthen the section. And then my only other comment was for the cost section. We are missing costs for materials to print the book and publish the ebook. So I think even if the applicant plans to cover this with their own finances, I would still make sure it's listed in there to make sure we're getting everything on that.
Thank you, Marissa. Any new, additional, or opposing comments? Then please finalize your scores and update your online comments. And let me know if you need more time. The next application is Michele Heather Pollock, and the first reader is Rachel.
Okay. So in this application, I would have liked to see more explanation and about the career stage description related to writing and publications. The artist has, I did see that she has received an MFA in writing, but it's been a number of years, and so I wondered like what happened between then. She's obviously become a visual artist instead. So I just wondered whether if there was any reflection on why she quit writing for so long and has now gone back to it in order to understand like how this will continue to help her grow as a writer. What has she learned sort of from leaving it behind and then coming back? And since this was for a self-published book of poetry, I wasn't sure how to measure that it would have a great impact on her growth as a poet or on her career as a writer, since it sort of didn't, I don't know, there was nothing in it about having it reviewed by anyone, and she states that she wouldn't get any editors or anyone to look over it. So I just kind of questioned that, doing it on my own and not getting any feedback, and whether it's really going to be a finished piece that might, that she'll be, I mean, she would be satisfied with it, but would it really have that literary element? And the resume seemed kind of incomplete to me. She described some education experiences which were in the narrative, but they had some awards that she had won, but they weren't on the resume. So I definitely think she should add those and make sure that she, presents all of her accolades across that on the resume. The public benefit and engagement, it seems sort of thrown together to me and not quite thought out. From being in an organization where I often create poetry readings and poetry gatherings and workshops and events, you really have to figure out how to market and get your audience there. It's very difficult to get people to attend, and I didn't see that she necessarily had the experience to offer that programming. I wondered whether she has been engaged in, there's a, I believe this applicant was from the Brown County area. There's a really strong poetry community in Bloomington. So I wondered if she had already made connections there with some of those people, if she had tried to engage with any of the programming that is to be offered there. The budget really lacked concrete numbers or details to me. I questioned even I don't know, she said that the page number was 90, but a typical poetry manuscript is really more like 48 to 50 pages. So I didn't know if that was it was too high, like maybe this has not been researched as well as it could be. We do publish some books at the Indiana Writers Center too, and I know that there's some expenses that go into them, but the estimated expenses seemed pretty high for that. And then I also just, since it is a self-published book, I would have liked to know a little bit of experience with her her book design experience, and how that kind of, since she says she wouldn't hire anyone else for this, like I would have liked to see a mention of what her own design experiences and editing experiences are. That's all.
Thank you, Rachel. The second reader, Kevin.
Yes, I think just to follow up on what Rachel said, I would agree with a lot of it. I mean, maybe the only
Kevin, it's muted. Okay.
I totally unmuted it. Maybe I didn't. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Rachel had to say. I mean, it seems like it's a writer who went into a studio practice who now is bringing poetry back into her studio practice and her photography practice. And so I think, with that, the book publication, isn't necessarily a traditional poetry book as we think of it to be distributed at bookstores, but I think it's more of a way to build that into this applicant's studio practice. And so, with those full color photographs to go along with the poems, I think that's the plan. That really ups the expense of the book, but then it gives the applicant something to include in her studio sales and around the community. I think I've done some workshops in Brown County, and I was pretty impressed with the research that the applicant has done on not just doing things at the library, but some of the other places in the town and the county where she can connect with a wider range of people, including like a local land trust, as well as local youth centers and those sorts of things. So, so I like the public component of the project, and I think kind of looking at this artist move back into her writing practice, I think is something that's interesting.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments? Now, please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. The next application is Molly Helpingstine. The first reader, Dan.
All right. In terms of the impact on the artist's career, I saw the project summary as being somewhat vague. She uses the phrase network with other writers, and then the author will actively encourage and provide resources to other young writers to pursue their dreams. And I'm not 100% sure how that would play out. So I would like to see more specificity in terms of that kind of a plan for impact. I think there was a lack of a kind of next step toward growth. In terms of the, sorry, I'm just scrolling here. Quality of the work, I see a somewhat limited niche group of readers drawn to this kind of work, and that feels somewhat problematic to me in terms of a public benefit at a substantial level. And so I wanted to see a greater level of immersion, perhaps in contemporary fiction, for a more artful and stronger writing sample. As far as the goals, the applicant simply says, my ultimate goal is to publish and sell as many books as I can before I stop. I guess I wanted to hear more about a plan toward growth as an artist, an avenue toward the evolution of the writing, or toward artistic and personal development in some way. As far as feasibility goes, I think it probably is feasible to go to some of these places and sell, hand sell copies of a book. However, I wasn't convinced that the plan revolving around self-promotion is perhaps the best use of a grant.
Thank you, Dan. The second reader is Rachel.
I also was a little confused about her plan. In the original short description, it says she's going to attend a writing workshop, but then what I get left with is, in the actual project description, is a long list of links and no reason as to why those are the right places for the artist to go. And what is actually the workshop that she would be attending that would help to improve her writing. Instead, it ends up that it later says that she wants to really be a vendor at a big convention. So that's a little bit different. So there's some disconnect between the description and then the project detail. So I'm not sure that she's clearly expressing what her goal is. I actually liked the little artist statement that was on her resume, so I would have liked to see if she could have developed something more like that in the actual application narrative about her career. What's written there now doesn't really tell me that much about her, just kind of about that. It tells me more about how many signings and promotions she's done, but not really about her career as a writer and her journey as a writer. And I didn't really see a clear plan for the public benefit. It was mostly just talking about how she's done signings and that she just continues, like her plan was just to continue to do some signings. There was nothing that was specifically targeting an audience and trying to engage with them. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Rachel. Any new, additional, or opposing comment?
My comment is for the project description section. I just thought it was a little distracting having the monetary expenses listed in here next to the events. There's an entire section for that. So I just think it would help to strengthen this application by just keeping the money in the money section and keeping the narrative in the narrative section.
Thank you, Marissa. Any other comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. The next application is for Ralph Purkhiser. Rachel's the first reader.
Okay, I'm just pulling this up still. So I found this proposal to be a little bit vague. There was, in the career status, I liked that he did tell the story for like how he's through the years kind of come to be writing and how that's changed. So I did enjoy that there was a lot of detail put into the career, sort of his history and why he's writing where this project has come from. So it sort of seemed more like, but because of that, it seemed more like a personal project. I wasn't sure how this would be marketed to the public. Like, it's kind of a small group of people to enjoy Christmas stories for children. I didn't know if he had tried to make any connections with like children's book illustrators on his own. I believe this was to try and hire a company that would self-publish, but they would provide the illustrator. But I didn't know if he had looked into resources of his own, like the Society for Children's Authors and Illustrators, to maybe try and make connections to see whether he wants to go that route. I didn't know what his background, if he'd done research into that, if he'd made connections, got a background for children's writers. Does he know other children's writers that can help him decide if this is the right way to do that? Because it seemed like he would kind of relinquish control by having the self-publishing company kind of take the book and do whatever they want with it. I didn't know with the public engagement, he's mentioning like maybe engaging with 1,000 to 2,000 people, but where, I don't know where he's getting those numbers. Like, how did you come to that conclusion? So I would so in general, I sound vague because I just felt like the application was kind of vague for me. Like, I just didn't have enough detail about how he would get the audience. Like, has he done public readings at schools and libraries? He mentions that he's going to do it, but is it something that he's actually gotten in touch with to see whether he can reach that number of people? Is that an outlandish or unfeasible kind of goal? That's all I have.
Thank you, Rachel. The second reader is Barbara.
I would agree with Rachel and add to that that he has no plan at all. He doesn't even answer the question for the public benefit. So we would really need to know what he plans to do there. And I feel like this application would be a lot stronger if it reflected research that he has done, not only on the cost of self-publishing, but how self-publishing works, and the wisdom of using programs offered by self-publishers that often cost a lot of money and are often not necessarily the best way to do it. So I feel like this would be stronger with information about the self-publishing at the front, rather than thinking I'm going to get the grant and then I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do that. And I would also just say again that he really does not have any kind of credentials or background at all as a writer for children, which is a very, very particular field. And there are certain kinds of requirements and ways of approaching writing for children that you really should know about if you're gonna publish a book for that market. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Barbara. Any new, additional, or opposing comments?
Just a quick comment. This might just be a technical thing, but I noticed that the artist's resume included high school information, and I think once you graduate college, that can be omitted. I can't talk. Omitted from the resume just because it's kind of implied. So it might just be a technical thing, but it's something I noticed.
Thank you. Any other comments? And then please finalize your scores and update your online comments. And let me know if you need more time. The next application is for Samuel Barnett. Kevin's the first reader.
Yes, this application has a lot of strengths in terms of turning poetry into a public art and engaging, a smaller town and county in Indiana in that work. And so I think the application shows that this is a model that the artist and writer has used in many other places, and so it's a model that he's now applying to Indiana. And so so it's not necessarily the traditional production of poetry, one person writing some poems, but it very much is using this applicant's role in the community to get others involved in the writing of the poetry, turning that into, as he says, a poetic history, going back to James Wilkin Riley, but then using that as a stepping off point to engage people of all ages in writing workshops. So I think, with the past experience running these writing workshops, relative proximity to Carroll County, and I think also just the established connections the applicant already has. I think this is a pretty specific project for a pretty specific area that I think is going to have kind of a lasting impact for Carroll County, as well as projects that the applicant is working on in Gary and Lake County, and then possibly expanding this to other areas. So I think as far as the public benefit is certainly there, and as well as just kind of feasibility and project management, it seems like this applicant has a lot of that experience already and has done a lot of the research and made some initial connections that then they can build on over the course of the grant period to really kind of bring together some history and connect it to a lot of restoration efforts and historical efforts, but Wabash and Erie Canal, some of these other efforts, the Delphi Opera House, some of these other connections to bring back the history of the area. And then this is another way to celebrate that. And there's enough infrastructure in place for that to happen. And I think ending with the printing component, I think it's an important outcome for the participants, and it gives a lasting artifact for the work that everyone did together in the community.
Thank you, Kevin. The second reader, Marissa.
I think everything Kevin said was really well put together. My only comments are for the public benefit section. I said that the applicant does a good job of identifying how he will reach the target publics. I like that this project aimed for reaching a wide variety of people. So it's not just confined to one area. One thing I did want to know was what demographics exactly will be served in terms of race, ethnicity, age, education level, etc. And then at the end of the public participation section, the applicant says, therefore I'm putting even more into planning and preparation for this project than previous projects. And then it just kind of ends. They didn't really go into detail as to what further preparation is being taken. So should add more there. Is this referring to the number of boxes being located in separate areas? And then I guess because I live in Indianapolis, I was also curious to know, will there be a partnership with the James Whitcomb Riley Museum? It's just something that I kept waiting for to pop up and it never did. So just curious there too as well.
Thank you, Marissa. Any new, additional, or opposing comments? Then please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. The next application is Sarah Layden. Rachel has a conflict of interest, so she'll be placed on hold for this application's review. The first reader is Barbara.
Okay, I'll just read my comments. The artist shows discipline and commitment in her writing career so far. Her desire to learn and enhance skills in a new area, creative nonfiction, illustrates her determination to become a truly professional writer with a wide range of abilities. And the two aspects of the project she describes will serve this goal well. I appreciated the idea that writing is, in a way, always an apprenticeship because there is so much to learn. I am familiar with the AWP conference, and I know that the artists will benefit from the quality of workshops on creative nonfiction available there, as well as the opportunity to connect with other CNF writers. And the project itself seems a good vehicle for using the artist's expertise in fiction and journalism to augment her study and exploration of creative nonfiction. The selections, quality selection, the artist submitted illustrated the range, versatility, and quality of her work. Why I Banned The Handmaid's Tale is a thoughtful, intelligent consideration of troubling cultural issues made accessible in a way that the writer, so that the writer connects it to her teaching life. Another piece is humorous, but also thought-provoking. And then a novel excerpt illustrates her skills as a fiction writer. In these few pages, the reader picks up on the very clever premise of the novel, and the theme of the book is clear without being told. It's a very strong quality of the submission. And then for the public benefit, there's a lot of interest in memoir writing and telling family stories and genealogy. Which means that the programs she plans will probably be well attended. I like it that they will take place in the counties where the story she's researching takes place. I think that's really cool. And I also think that teaching research skills and sharing observation about her own research will be of a lot of help to those who are considering similar kinds of projects. Feasibility, I think she has laid out a very feasible plan. She's familiar with the conference she plans to attend and has already begun work on the writing project she described. Her experience in planning and undertaking the book tour for her recent novel will prove useful in planning and undertaking the community programs for this project. So that's what I have to say. I think this is a strong proposal.
Thank you, Barbara. The second reader, Dan.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I thought right from the outset, the description of the project, project summary, not only showed a real strength of vision for the project, but a deep level of specificity, which I really appreciated, with vivid and specific detail all throughout. In terms of the impact on the artist's career, I see that aligned really nicely with the feasibility. Her background as a journalist at a very high level and as a fiction writer at a very high level can come together in a really unique and compelling way, I think, in this project. I like that she connects it to things like Ancestry.com and that kind of surge in interest we've seen in genealogy and the way that people seek to kind of gain a greater context for their own identity by learning about their family history. I think she's right on the money in terms of that level of interest, and I think Barb is right that those events will fill up. She mentions reading in the 3 different counties, and it looks like a really good plan to me. What I particularly liked about that was she's not just reading from the manuscript or just booking a kind of typical bookstore reading, but rather she mentioned specifically that she wants to share her research techniques at those events as well. And I think that's going to draw in more people and be more of a two-way dynamic than just simply reading from a manuscript that's finished. The quality of work was very high for me as well. And then again, I would remark to echo what Barb was saying about the evidence of successful planning literary events in the past gives me great confidence that she's able to do this at a very high level.
Thank you, Dan. Any new, additional, or opposing comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. The next application is Shari Wagner. Rachel has a conflict of interest, so she'll be placed on hold for this application's review. Marissa is the first reader.
Overall, I think this applicant did a really nice job and gave a great amount of detail. So a few things in the career development section. Thought she did a nice job. I would like to know how completing this project would impact her future career prospects. And I scrolled too quickly. There we are. What does she hope to learn? What skills does she hope to gain from this project? What does she accomplish beyond finishing this project? And then I don't believe it was mentioned. I may have missed it, but I would also like to know why the applicant chose these historical men and women specifically. I don't think that was identified. It just seemed kind of random to me. So outlining that as much as possible. Thought the resume was nice and clean with very strong references. I thought that including samples from the book project specifically would make it stronger if those exist. I think that would be great to include. For public benefit, wasn't sure how ongoing engagement would be measured in particularly. Will there be a follow-up survey, etc.? I thought this section was very strong and clear to understand what the objectives are. I really like that the applicant already had experience in this area, so it was clear that she knew what needed to be done. Great details on marketing, which I think I may be a stickler for because I've mentioned it every time. Like that her projects, I like that her projects have already made an impact on the community. For feasibility, I just encourage breaking down what the living expenses are specifically. It just seemed kind of broad. Overall, I think that's everything I had for this applicant.
Thank you, Marissa. The second reader, Kevin.
Yeah, I'd second a lot of what Marissa said. I think a strong applicant with a strong body of work. I think I'd like to see a little bit more, maybe just a couple poems in this new direction, because I think it gets to Marissa's comment about why these people, what's important about that. How do they connect together? How do the poems work? We can see that persona voice in the poems that were submitted. Then I also wonder, it seems like this is just essentially like a free class for the Indiana Writers Center, which is great for that audience and that very specific audience they've cultivated. But I'd like to see, if you're doing Cole Porter, could you do an event in Peru, or how can you kind of get out of existing audiences and take this important work to more citizens of the state?
Thank you, Kevin. Any new, additional, or opposing comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments, and let me know if you need more time. And the final application is Victoria Barrett. Barb has a conflict of interest, so she'll be placed on hold for this application's review. The first reader is Dan.
Okay. Again, we have a fiction project with a strong research component and a really compelling Indiana setting, which I found very thoroughly articulated in the proposal. I was impressed with the preliminary research that enabled the applicant to write with a great deal of clarity and power about this book project and the family stories behind it. Probably for me, the strongest part of the application was the career development. She was able to, again, really thoroughly track her record of serving the Indiana literary community for many years through the grueling work of running a small press. And so it just made perfect sense to me, the way that this was written, that it's time now for her to focus on her work in a pretty in a more focused way, so that she's been torn in many different directions, doing really good work of literary citizenship in the state, but now it's time to focus on this book. So that made perfect sense to me. I thought it was really well written. The writing sample's strong. And then again, in terms of the thoroughness, there's just a lot here as far as public benefit, just kind of processing and thinking through a variety of ideas. And I think that the applicant clearly has a strong network formed over many years now to tap into in terms of public engagement for this project.
Thank you, Dan. The second reader, Rachel.
Oh, can you hear me? Sorry. Yes, I agree with Dan. This was a very well organized and very well articulated proposal. It definitely not only described the work that has been done, but also the artist's own career development and her personal investment in this project. I liked how the artistic career only mentioned her journey as a writer and her literary citizenship, but then also went ahead and talked about what this novel means to her and why it's an important project, why this is the project that this time and money needs to be spent on. And then in the part about the community engagement, she really articulated how she has relevant experience in doing these events, and she has the connections to create the event that she wants, and it just seemed very well planned, well thought out, and I didn't have any problems believing that the artist would definitely be able to meet those goals.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments? Please finalize your scores and update your online comments. And let me know if you need more time. Well, this concludes the Individual Advancement Program FY20 Literature Advisory Review Panel. Thank you very much.